The moment distance from the life you have built unfolds. I recorded an earlier video touching on this topic, but today I want to expand. There's a particular kind of mourning some midlife women know well. They feel it in the marrow of their bones. Nothing dramatic has changed in their lives. There hasn't been any confrontations. There hasn't been a diagnosis, no phone call that had changed everything. So you go about your day, you make the coffee or the tea the same way you've made it for years. You look out the same view from the same window in the kitchen nook. But somewhere between that first sip and that second sip, you feel a small niggling distance opening up between yourself and the life sitting right there in front of you, close enough to touch and somehow already out of reach. So I want to start there today because that's closer to how this actually shows up for most women in midlife who comes to this point where there is dissonance in their lives. It starts like this. Nothing so dramatic. Now, it tends to show up in the same four places, and it will feel familiar even if you've never said it out loud. The first place it shows up is in your work, where the role that once organized your sense of who you were now runs fine without requiring the parts of you that used to feel most alive inside of it. You're still good at your work, but you're simply not fully inside of it anymore. And some days that gap is the loneliest thing in the room. Now, the second place it shows up is in your identity, where the roles still fit. Yeah, they still seem like they fit, but that's from the outside. They're reliable, it's capable, the one everyone counts on. But internally, again, a gap has opened between the woman performing the role and the woman actually living inside her own skin. Now, please start commenting if you are resonating with these areas where this dissonance in your life is showing up. Now, the third area is in your relationships, where your conversations with people who've known you for 25, 30 years start to feel like they're addressing someone else. It's definitely an earlier draft of you, one you've quietly have been revising in private without telling a single soul. And then the fourth area, this is more subtle because underneath all three of the previous ways it shows up, there's a low, steady dissonance. Nothing you can point to in a sentence. It's just a persistent sense of being slightly off kilter. It's just like a photograph that's out of focus. You've seen that, right? So none of these alone is catastrophic, which is why sometimes it can go unnoticed or you don't address it. But together, they're a pattern worth naming precisely. So the language available to describe this rarely fits, and it never did. Midlife crises implies malfunction, something broken, requiring urgent repair. But nothing is malfunctioning. And then reinvent yourself implies the woman you've been wasn't real, that she needs replacing like a part. And that's why when you look at my previous YouTube channel, it used to be called Rise and Reinvent. And I've moved away from the word or the naming of reinvention. So this woman was real. She was just simply under examined. And then when we start using the term start over, again, that implies that you're discarding decades of decisions that, in fact, built something genuinely worth keeping, brick by brick, at real cost. So none of these phrases were ever built for what's actually happening right now in your life, in that gap that is expanding. What's happening right now is quieter and far more precise than any of those terms could ever suggest. Now, here is the distinction that I want to offer instead. Now, ladies, I want you to feel the relief in this because this is not chaos. This is structural misalignment. That feeling of being off kilter, that's misalignment. A structure that was built correctly for one set of conditions, one season in your life, doesn't automatically fit a new set of conditions just because it was built well the first time. Your life was very likely designed accurately for who you were, what you needed, and who depended on you at the time that you built that life. But the conditions have changed the way conditions always do everywhere in the world, in our lives. But the structure didn't automatically get an update. The conditions changed, but you didn't change internally to move it out externally. And that is what happens to any structure that isn't reviewed on a schedule. And nobody ever hands you the schedule. So ladies, this is not failure. Not at all. And here's the part I think gets missed entirely. And it's the part that used to bring me to tears once I finally understood it. Most of us were trained with a real fluency in caretaking and productivity and reading exactly what everyone else needed from us before they even said a word. Now, comment if you resonate with that. But almost none of us were trained with fluency in reading our own internal architecture and noticing early and specifically when a structure has quietly stopped matching the person that is living inside of it. This was exactly my experience. I was so discombobulated, feeling that I'm still ticking the boxes, but I feel like the boxes sort of switched around. The label for the boxes had changed. What you're calling a feeling isn't really a feeling, ladies. It's data. Data that you need to sit back and examine. It's the moment enough internal signals have accumulated that the misalignment finally becomes legible, visible to you. Recognition in that sense isn't emotional collapse. And that's what sometimes people can, or society can try to imply about women at this stage in our lives, that we're chaotic, that we are in collapse, that our life has become a catastrophe. No, it's simply the moment you became fluent enough in your own life to read what it had been telling you all along. So once you can read it this way, something shifts quietly in your chest. You stop treating the internal dissonance as an alarm to silence as quickly as possible. Pom, pom, pom. Like, shut it off, shut it off, shut it off. No, you're no longer treating it that way. And you start treating it as information worth studying carefully. You stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what specifically no longer fits? And what would fit now? This is when the thoughts are circling in your mind about how redesign would be necessary or ideal in your life. So remember, that's not a dramatic shift, it's a quiet one. But it changes what you do next completely, and it changes it for good. So, if this describes a morning you've had, I want you to know two things. I want you to actually let them land, okay? You're not imagining it, and you're not behind, because that'll be what women will be thinking, that they're too old, that they're behind. No, you're simply becoming fluent in something nobody taught you how to read. That's where we are today. So, if this names something real for you, hit the like, subscribe, share this with another woman who you have engaged in conversation, and you've been having this feeling, this gap that has been widening in your lives. And tell me in the comments whether this is where you are right now. It helps more women find their way to this conversation. I am Lynette, and this is where we create our lives, not by default, by design.